Sorry.
Resident Evil Requiem is the 9th entry in the Resident Evil series, but actually the 11th, but technically, who even knows? But one thing is certain, this was the highly anticipated new installment of the beloved survival horror series, and especially so because this one was set to combine the series' trademark survival horror elements with its trademark action horror elements. And after finishing it, I gotta say, it's easily a top 5 game in the series. Hell, if you want to say it's top 1, I don't know if I agree, but I won't fight you on it. Let's talk about it. Hi guys, DPX here, reviewing today Resident Evil Requiem. Now before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell, leave a comment, or I will blow up your house. Starting off with the good, well, Resident Evil Requiem is a goddamn banger. I mentioned the main thing this game does, and that's combine the action of the series and the horror of the series. And I will say, there was a time they tried that, and it didn't go so well. And it's called Resident Evil 6. However, the difference here is that RE9 splits these two styles by having you play as two different characters. You play as Grace Ashcroft, which, if you've played some of the smaller Resident Evil games, the name Ashcroft should sound familiar. When you play as Grace, the game is more of the typical survival horror game that Resident Evil does well. And I will say, my god, this game is terrifying. I love Resident Evil Village, but I did feel like that game was light on the horror. For a while, I felt like 7 did the horror better than any other game in the series. I'd even say that it was the scariest Resident Evil game, and one of the scariest games of all time. But you know what? Requiem might actually beat it. It has less horror in it by proxy of being half horror, half action, but the horror it does have, my god. And when you play as Grace, you are underpowered. You have less inventory space. You have less gun variety. You have less gun ammo. You are slower, and just overall more vulnerable and underpowered, which adds a hell of a lot to the horror of the game. But it's not just that. It's the monster designs. They are super terrifying and make me shake. And what also helps the horror elements is the first-person perspective. When playing as Grace, the game defaults to first person, which I always thought was more terrifying, although you can switch it to third person if you want to. But that's only one half of the game, as the other half you play as Leon motherfucking Kennedy. And he's as badass as ever, even in his early 50s. But when you play as Leon, it's more action horror. He's got more inventory space, more gun variety, more ammo, and is more about shooting monsters, while Grace is more about running away and hiding from them. The gunplay is clean, the movement is smooth, and the action when playing as Leon is just sick. And when you play as him, it's defaulted to third person, which makes sense for action gameplay. Although like Grace's first person gameplay, you can switch it if you want to. I didn't switch either of them. You know, I did play them the way they were defaulted. But I think in another playthrough, I should try Grace in third person and Leon in first person, because that actually adds replay value, seeing how, believe it or not, they both feel rather different. I mean, it still feels like the same game, but it actually does change up the gameplay a little bit. But either way, despite Leon's gameplay being more action focused, believe it or not, there's actually still a lot of horror in it. As remember, it's not just action, it's action horror. But overall, I know I've spent a lot of time on this, but it's a major part of the game, as it really meshes the two styles very well. Even though there's a lot of Leon and therefore action in this game, I still walked away feeling like I got a really solid horror experience, and vice versa. But what connects these two characters is the story. There have been other Resident Evil games where there are two characters consisting of a newer character and a more iconic protagonist of the series. When that happens, I come away thinking the iconic character was the most memorable and it wasn't even close. But honestly, with Requiem, I thought Grace was a really cool protagonist. Her main thing is that she has a lot of trauma and anxiety and a mysterious past, and you can really tell that as the VA conveys this really well. Like, I know it's super early, but Angela Sant'Albano deserves a Best Performance nomination at the Game Awards. She absolutely fucking kills it. And that's not taking away from Leon, who's back, but older. he's been through this before, and you can feel it in his mannerisms during cutscenes and even during the gameplay. He's still a badass, but also aging and hurting, and I think they did that really well. But okay, enough about the two characters. What about the story? Well, Requiem's story is awesome, if a bit convoluted, but you come to expect that from Resident Evil. Requiem's story is surely convoluted, but in an endearing way, and you can see certain twists and reveals happen that connect things together, and even certain characters making appearances, and it was awesome. There's certainly fan service in the game, but it's done super well. I don't want to give spoilers, but I'll just say that the story is really damn good. As for other things, the sound design. I've made it clear in my reviews that, like, whenever I mention the sound design, it's because it's really good. Otherwise, it's really not worth mentioning. Not even if it's bad, it's just, if it's just normal sound design, it's not worth mentioning. But in Resident Evil Requiem, the sound design is fucking amazing. You notice a horror game kind of needs good sound design, and even, like, the bad ones kind of nail it. And this is a damn good one, so it nails the sound design. And just like how the VA for Grace should get a nomination for Best Performance, I think RE9 deserves a Best Sound Design nomination. And lastly, holy shit, the visuals. This is one of the best looking games of the generation, and that RE engine just doesn't miss. And I played this game on PS5, base PS5, not Pro, and it still looks amazing. And little side note, from what I've seen, even the Switch 2 version looks fucking amazing. Capcom has something really special with their RE engine, and they sure got something special with Resident Evil Requiem. Moving on to the mixed, I want to specify that the mixed is things that aren't good, aren't bad, or if they are good or bad, they are good or bad with caveats. First is the cheesy dialogue. I won't hold that against the game. Resident Evil always has some very cheesy, and it's no different here, as Leon will often drop a random one-liner. It's not bad, but it is cheesy. Another thing I'm mixed on is the music. Not that it's bad, but Resident Evil isn't particularly known for its music, so I wasn't expecting a banger soundtrack here. I'm only mentioning it because in all my reviews I mention the game's music, so I just do that here too. I will say that there are some tracks in the game that were decent, like the title screen, but as a whole, the music isn't really anything to write home about. But then again, Resident Evil has never had music that really stood out for the most part. There are some exceptions, of course. And lastly, the length. Now, another thing I mention a lot in the mixed is things to be aware of that may not be good or bad. And I'd say, for this case, the length is something worth mentioning. I personally didn't have a problem with the length of the game, but yes, it is rather short, I do understand. Being about like 12 hours long and not much longer, and not a whole lot longer if you do more than just beelining it. I think it's more about what you do with those 12 hours, and Resident Evil Requiem does some crazy good shit with it. But just keep that in mind. Moving on to the bad, there isn't a whole lot. I honestly tried to find things I didn't like, but had a hard time with that. But there were some things. For example, yes, the visuals are amazing, but some moments I ran into some visual glitches, like here when Leon was holding his guns and the straps for the gun is just an extended line that like didn't move and just looked very weird. That happened a few times, and it was just weird. And lastly, the villains, plural. There's 2 villains in RE9, and not that they are bad. In fact, I think it did come together well with the 2 villains, but there's a bit of an imbalance and they don't feel as important for chunks of the game as they should. But that's about it, really.
Looks like the BSAA set up HQ here.
Abandoned?
Not sure.
Overall, despite certain issues, Resident Evil Requiem is a goddamn banger and shows 9 entries in, plus a bunch of other non-numbered ones. Resident Evil as a series is still fresh, still exciting, and still as badass and epic as ever. The way the game meshes both the survival horror and action horror, it truly is the best of both worlds, as this isn't a case of both at once, but rather a yes and, if that makes sense. When you play as Grace, you see some of, if not the best horror in the Resident Evil series. When you play as Leon, it's some of the most badass and satisfying action in the series since, well, the series' peak with Resident Evil 4 and its subsequent remake. Resident Evil Requiem simply proves that the franchise is one of the best going right now, and that's why I give Resident Evil Requiem a 10 out of 10. Maybe I'm just on a high, but I truly, like, when I'm playing this game, I'm like, this game has done almost everything right. You know, and some of these smaller things that are barely even worth mentioning, and I only mention them because I have a segment for the bad. You know, so yeah, this is truly, I think it's one of the best Resident Evil games, top 5 easily, maybe even top 3. I don't know if it beats out the original Resident Evil 4 and its remake, but I think it might beat out everything else. What do you guys think of Resident Evil Requiem? I know this review, this one took me a little while, but it's here. So what do you guys think? You guys like the game, not like the game? Have you guys played the game, not played the game? And if you guys haven't played the game, do you guys want to play it, not want to play it? Anything about the game, let me know down below. Anyways, be sure to like the video, come subscribe, or I will burn your house down. Or whatever it is I said at the beginning of the video.